I was almost gonna say weekly Q&A, but now it's like bi-monthly Q&A, which we do every other Wednesday now. But welcome everyone, and welcome Coach Alina.
Hi Daniel, nice to meet you. Nice to see you, and happy to be back, because I know you took like a while from all this like video making and so on. So it's really nice to be back again.
Yeah. For those, I had to share this on the channel, but for those who don't know, I was taking some time off in Spain during the summer, which was a very nice time. And I didn't, oftentimes I'm like, oh, before we have questions, we could talk about this, but I didn't prepare anything. But then I was like, I remember that you actually have rebranded your, your website and stuff like that. Maybe you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I basically renamed like the YouTube channel, the Instagram and everything, like under one like a different name. So it's not Sleep Talks, but it's now like Fearless Sleep. And there were like many reasons for that. And I basically first I came up with a name for for YouTube, right? Because it felt natural, because I talk about it. So it felt like, fine. But then when I started writing like also articles and stuff, then it was like already, it didn't have the same vibe. Like it was more like a podcast thing, or like a show name or something, but it was not representing, I would say, clearly the actual thing what I'm talking about here. So I wanted also to maybe even kind of like narrow it down, because I know that when we talk about sleep, or like think about like just the topic of sleep, it can be so broad, and we can think of anything by that, like what is exactly, like we can think about like sleep talks. So I decided to really kind of make it so kind of specific, so only people who struggle with something like fear around sleep, they are more likely to maybe understand what this project is about. So that's why I picked this fearless part. And yeah, I hope it works. I hope it works out.
That's super
Yeah.
nice. And yeah, it makes sense. Like sleep talks, that could be about anything. That's so
Yeah.
true. And like fearless sleep, you have a sense of what it's about. And
Yeah. And it's actually having like a double
yeah,
meaning,
tell us.
because like
Yeah.
my original meaning was that because when we struggle with insomnia and this like hyperarousal, there's so much fear around this topic, right? Around the whole idea of like falling asleep or whatever, right? So for me, like fearless sleep is that sleep without that fear, like not having to think about it, like to obsess over it. But then also it could be perceived like as fearless, as like more courageous, so there is like different dynamic, which is in a way like we do need courage, right, to be on the journey. So it has double meaning here. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when you mentioned it, it reminded me of like one of the very, very first communications we had, when you described how when you had trouble sleeping yourself, and you had these ideas like, oh, if I sleep on the left side of the bed, my brain is telling me to do that again because I slept well there, so I don't do it. Like, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that's like like a fearless way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And since that time, like, yeah, for me, that fearless, the first like kind of like push to actually challenge my fear, that was like a big step. I would say that like it gave me like new perspective, because I was avoiding it for such a long time. Then I was basically, for me actually, it kind of like energetically and emotionally costed me more to not face the fear rather than face it. So I feel like, and I think we were discussing a little bit this kind of like when to be more like kind of fearless and when to be more like gentle. And I would say one of the indicators when we are ready for more like fearless approach to deploy more courage is actually when we look at our like basically whatever is happening, is it worth waiting out in that, like this avoiding life, avoiding everything. So sometimes we kind of get close to this kind of state when we are more angry, more annoyed. And I feel like in that anger and this annoyance, there is a potential to actually take a step, like to take this leap. So I would say when a person is really kind of in the state when they really need to go a bit easy, they don't feel that anger. They just feel like, okay, I'm really scared. And this is when maybe more gentle approach would be kind of like more appropriate. But when a person feels like, okay, I'm done with it, I hate this situation, so I so there is some sort of like this drive that can actually help us to just face whatever we were avoiding for such a long time. And what we usually discover there, like we get like new insights and realize that what we were afraid of all this time is actually like nothing. There's
Yeah.
nothing to be afraid of. Yeah, so that's yeah, that was definitely really good for me to go through that stage as well.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. And by the way, there's some people are live here with us. Just feel free to post questions in the comment section, and we'll get to them. And we have actually somebody saying hi. It's Gigi. Hi, hello there from Homestead, from Florida. Hand
Ah,
pink waving. Hi.
hi,
Nice
Gigi.
seeing you. And yeah,
Yeah.
just spinning off of what you said. One thing that I've found, coaching wise, is when somebody says like, "Hey, Daniel, like I'm just like fed up. I'm so tired of this. I'm sick of it." That person is often saying that from a place where they're not necessarily feeling like they're making any progress. Like they're just like feeling kind of stuck, if you will. But when I hear things worded that way, that like I'm so fed up, I'm just sick of this, I'm tired of it. To me, that's actually very encouraging because,
Yeah.
as you said, that they're so close to being in a place where they're like, I'm not playing this game anymore. I'm not going to try. I'm just kind of there. They're very close to kind of abandoning the effort. So, do you feel like something similar?
Yeah, exactly. I do feel like stuff that originally feel like a defeat or something like I should not feel that are actually a good sign of of progress. So one of those is that, yeah, feeling kind of like irritated, fed up with this, maybe like anger shows up for me. That's a huge resource for actually like propel through this, like make a big leap on the journey. And then another thing is sadness, because for to me sadness and crying and whatever it is, that's a form of acceptance.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that because we usually perceive acceptance as this kind of like, oh, I am at peace, everything is fine. No, but sometimes it can look differently. Sometimes it could be like completely like, I'm so sad, I'm crying. And usually people after they cry, after they kind of like admit that they don't know what to do anymore and they kind of like give up, and after that usually happens this kind of like relief when things get a little bit like easier. And in that's also a part of acceptance. Or another sign, like a good sign, is, at least to me, is that they're just like losing interest in the whole
Yeah.
topic. They're engaging less. They don't feel so much need to keep. They don't have much questions. They don't want to watch any more videos or read something or research anything. To me, that's a wonderful sign, actually. Like losing the interest, becoming
100%.
more like neutral to that.
Disinterest. Yeah. Totally
Yeah.
agree with you.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have a question here which I want to jump into, but there was something I thought about you when this thing hit my mind, which was a lot of people say like when as the struggle starts to fade, they actually kind of feel sad, or like it's not an exciting, it's some tinge of sadness. And I thought we could call that like post-insomnia blues and like describe that more. It's kind of
Oh, I
nice,
love
right?
that. I love that.
We should
It's
talk more about
yeah,
it.
yeah. It does feel like that. At least to me, that's how it felt. Like I
Right.
was kind of like, kind of relieved and sad at the same time. So it was like it came so naturally, and that sadness was effortless. And I didn't want to do anything with that sadness. I just wanted to be with that. And gradually, it started transforming into basically taste for life and not
Yeah.
for insomnia or sleep. So that was like really a great moment to kind of like just be with that sadness, because that's also part of that process. It's like,
Yeah.
this 7 steps or whatever it is, like when like you first, when something happens,
Oh, this
when
like grief, like
yeah,
anger,
yes,
like
yeah,
the stages of,
bargain.
stages of grief. Is it? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, something like this. And at the bottom there is acceptance. So it's not in the beginning. First there is like maybe like anger or whatever, like I don't take this, I don't accept this. Then there is like trying to kind of like appeal, maybe like bargain. And then there is maybe something like whatever, I don't remember the steps, but it's so reminds me of that, of this process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, we should definitely talk more about that. But okay, let's
Mhm.
jump in here. Gigi, who said hi to us from Florida, says we can start here. Actually, I'm a 30-year-old female. I go to around 10 p.m., but waking up 4 or 5 a.m. And I have a question: is 6 to 7 hours of sleep normal? How do I know if I've had enough sleep? I've had issues for a while, but have been working on it thanks to your videos. So, firstly, it seems like things have been getting a little easier, which is so nice to hear, of course. And the question is, okay, is 6 to 7 hours of sleep normal? And how do I know if I've had enough sleep? What do you think when you hear those questions?
Yeah, I would say, to me at least, like, how do I know I had enough sleep? I don't really think about sleep itself. So it's more like night is over and I'm like on to the next day. So and I can just, I go into it, and then, but even if I don't feel so much energy, I still, so it's like, it's a very, I would say, in that question there is already kind of like some sort of like the desire to quantify this, to know like whether I'm reaching certain standards, while in reality there are no standards. There's no right amount of sleep. So 6-7 hours can be just great amount for like of hours for some person, and for other it could be 5 hours, right? Or for someone it could be 8 hours. So it's like really each person has their own normal. And if you feel like I don't know, if there is no this kind of like desire to change, or to to me it's kind of a little bit kind of tricky to answer this question, really, because it there's just there's no like right like metric to say that this is enough. I don't
Yeah,
know.
exactly. I think another way to say what you're saying is that if somebody asks, "How do I know if I have enough sleep?" and somebody answers, "Well, this is how you know." Well, then that's tricky, because then it makes the assumption that, oh, I should, you know, I should be making sure I have enough sleep, and if I don't, like like if any way you answer that question, it could be an invitation to making that connection that how I feel depends on my sleep, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I would maybe inquire into the source of that question. What part of the brain wants to know that, and for what reason? Because if the reason to get some sort of like level of control over situation, that could be the source of that inner disturbance, like this conflict with this. Because in reality, some like I have days when I don't feel like I would sleep extra, because I kind of like feel sleepy and I had to wake up early. But that's okay. That's one of the experiences, right? And some days I sleep until I feel refreshed or whatever, like until I feel like, okay, I had enough, and that's it. So there's no obsession. There's no like always trying to have like, enough sleep, because sometimes life circumstances can be such that there is, sometimes we might not have like, we wish we could have slept more, let's say. Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah, yeah.
also okay. So I don't know if that makes sense
That's
for
nice.
Gigi,
No,
but
it makes total sense. And just just to add one thing that is kind of different from this kind of deeper discussion is, if you look at data, and there's actually a lot of data on this, like when you do like EEG measuring and objectively measures people's sleep, and you take like hundreds of people, you see that the average amount of like objective sleep for humans, adult humans, is typically like 6 hours 20 minutes. But there's of course variation in that. But I think the idea that we should sleep 8 hours is debunked at this point. And also, one more little thing on this topic is that even if we're all different and we tend to sleep a certain amount, some people tend to sleep more than others. There's also night to night variation. It's not like we eat the exact same amount of calories every day. It's the same with sleep. Sometimes sleep less, sometimes more. It depends. So
yeah,
um
absolutely.
so yeah, let's hope that was helpful to Gigi, and let's look at another one here from Brigitta, who's here and says, "Thank you for your work. Anytime. So glad you found it. What do you do if speed bumps come back after some progress? I say to myself, okay, it's just a speed bump. It'll go away. I'm okay. I'm just hyper aroused. Is that good enough? Thank you." Very nice question. What do you think when you hear this, Alina?
I think, of course, like meeting like speed bump and being okay like with a speed bump and knowing that it will eventually end is definitely helpful. But again, if we make it a condition, if we set it as some sort of like, okay, this is my strategy, how I'm going to approach my speed bumps, and then this should be enough for the speed bump to end, then we obviously have some sort of agenda of controlling that speed bump, which again, like it can be it can play out in the way that we will do everything technically right, but this underlying desire to actually, I don't want to meet speed bump, is what can create this situation when we did everything right, but then we didn't, or the speed bump, it keeps happening and happening and happening, and then we are questioning ourselves, what is going wrong, and so on and so on. So I would say that really in investigating the relationship with the speed bump, like whether it is something that considered to be an enemy or something that shouldn't be on our journey, which it's not like that, because it's a normal part of the process. But also anything that arises during a speed bump is also a subject to acceptance, meaning that admitting that we are afraid of a speed bump is also acceptance. Like, I accept that I'm afraid of a speed bump. Or let's say accepting our desires regarding our sleep. Let's say I accept that I want to sleep well during speed bump, right? So it's not just being okay with the external outcome, something that we don't have control over, but also accepting even ourselves, like our responses to it. That also can reduce so much friction on the way, because we don't feel obliged to always feel good about something. We also can, it's okay to not be okay, or things like that. So I would just introduce that kind of like acceptance towards yourself, because that's the ultimate self-kindness principle that is very helpful on this journey.
100%. And nothing to add except, what was I going to say? Is that good enough? Thank you. I would just say, you just kind of, this kind of spin off on my mind was just that, we often look like sometimes, well, I heard like, actually, I read in Sasha Stevens' book that she often got the question, like, am I doing things right or am I doing things wrong? And she would say that, when people say, am I doing things wrong? She'd say, well, there's one thing you're doing wrong, and that's thinking that you can do something wrong, because what we want, peaceful sleep, and it has no requirements. So just knowing that can take away a lot of pressure. And I read in what you said, Brigitte, a lot of kind of like understanding, a lot of self-kindness, and that is always really, really helpful. So I hope that helped. Let's look at some more questions. Here we have, let's see. This is Imke. I'm going to read this as Imke. That might be totally wrong, but after some sleepless nights, I often struggle to believe that eventually sleep will take over. Is it true that sleep eventually becomes stronger than anxiety and therefore will happen eventually? Another really nice question. I mean, insightful, like question. And I can go first here and say that two things come to my mind when I read this. And one is on the point of like, I often struggle to believe, and then one like, is it true that sleep eventually happens? So I would say this, that yes, it is true that sleep always happens. Like, it will always happen. It's just like a biological rule. We eventually, when we haven't slept for a long time, like, that sleep drive is going to be strong. And even if we're super anxious and super hyper aroused, sleep will happen. Now that said, like, our good friend and insomnia coach Martin Reedoff, I've heard him. He's often quoted saying like, sleep drive always wins, and it's true in a sense that sleep drive always kicks in and sleep always happens. But when we think of it as like a competition between like sleep drive and anxiety, it can be tricky, because we're portraying this kind of internal battle between like, oh, sleep drive has to win over anxiety. I have to create more sleep drive so it conquers the anxiety, which can keep us in the state of like, there's a fight, there's a battle that has to be maintained, when in reality is like, when we abandon the battle, when we don't no longer try to obtain sleep drive to conquer anxiety, then like the whole game is over. There is no anxiety around, no hyperarousal around it. So I think it can be helpful to know that yes, sleep will always happen. Like, you can't go wrong there. It will always happen. But it's abandoning a struggle really, really helps. And now speaking to the first one, I have a hard time believing. Well, what I often say when I hear that is that, the fundamental truth is that what we want, which is peaceful sleep, peace of mind, it actually it doesn't have any requirements. It doesn't even require us to believe in it. So if you're trying to convince yourself that I have to believe this for it to happen, that's another kind of inner struggle, right? But when we see that I don't have to believe, I don't have to be optimistic or hopeful. Of course, it feels nice to be hopeful and optimistic. I'm happy when somebody says I feel hopeful, but it's no requirement, and we're no longer trying to kind of force ourselves to believe. Then again, what we want just happens by itself. So yeah, those are my thoughts that came up here. But yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
No, I totally agree. I totally, this the first thing that came to my mind. Exactly, we don't need to believe for our body to produce sleep. That's the thing. I mean, it might feel good, like to like, yeah, I believe in that. But even belief, like even if we acquire this belief, sometimes it can turn into expectation or like demand. Like, okay, now I'm really believing into this, and and that becomes a pressure, right? It's like when we create a requirement for ourselves or a condition that um, as long as I am anxious, I cannot sleep, and therefore, when I'm calm, then I should sleep. So that usually happens that once the person actually feels calm, and the pressure on to sleep grows, and happens, and paradoxical situation happens where they are peaceful, they don't worry about anything, and yet they are awake. So this is like this create like there's no belief needed. I like that you said that there is like no requirements, and that's what I mean by when I say like also like sleep is unconditional and recovery is unconditional.
Right.
Actually, we don't have to get rid of anxiety to recover. We don't have to get rid of fear to recover. We don't need to get rid of sleep thoughts to recover. Like nothing. Whatever we feel like, oh, I'm not recovering because I still have this. Just simply like just remind yourself that is not needed for recovery to happen actually. And suddenly when we realize that this is not an obstacle, it is a part of recovery, then suddenly being with that thing that we've once thought as an enemy becomes easier. We just feel better, or it feels more, we have more capacity to be with that, which paradoxically makes the whole like thing easier because we are not fighting with ourselves.
Yeah, that was really nice and unconditional in that regard, in the way you presented that. Very, very nice. Yeah, it's unconditional. Very, very nice. All right, well, let's conclude there. We actually got a lot of questions. They came in a little late, but hopefully next time, anyone out there, like, get your questions in quickly. We can answer more of them. But we'll conclude here. We'll look forward to having you back real soon, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.